Kay went to the greengrocers this morning, and we've stopped the press. We've got a juicer. Finally.
Oh, you've fallen down that trend.
Fallen down the juicer hole, yeah. But it's been pretty cool because we put things like courgettes, and at the moment it's amazing because we can go out into the orchard and pick our own pears and our own plums and our own apples. I made an amazing blackberry, it was an orchard pie with all these different bits of fruit. Anyway, so we've got this juicer, and Kay's been getting loads of veg for the juicer. And she went to the greengrocers this morning, and she'd kind of made a list of veg that she'd like to get, looked at a few recipes, and on the list was watermelon. Okay. And so she gets down to the greengrocer and says to Natalie, "Have you got any watermelon?" And Natalie goes, "Actually, I do. I wasn't going to get any, but I thought I better get one just in case somebody wants it. But it's really, really expensive." And Kay went, and it's really interesting this. So she came home with a quarter of a watermelon, because I think that one would have been excessive. Not because it was expensive, but one would have been excessive. I love watermelon. So I'll have a play with that on the juice yesterday. But it really brought up a couple of things for me that I wanted to talk through today. And one is this principle of what is expensive. Okay, so Natalie's expensive is Kay's whatever. I don't care. And I think Kay's whatever I don't care is because she was going out to buy something she wanted.
Yeah.
And the fact that Natalie could provide it was enough to make the sale because she wanted it. The other thing I'd like to explore is, why did Natalie feel the need to apologise for how expensive it was? Thoughts?
Yes, interesting. Well, some of that is anchored in her own expectations of what expensive means to her. But just because you perceive something to be expensive doesn't mean that everyone perceives it to be expensive. And also, what's important to you may not be the same thing that's important to somebody else. So, for example, maybe Natalie doesn't really like watermelon.
True, so she wouldn't value it.
So she's not going to value it. So she's not going to... She might have it if it's not very expensive, but she's not going to pay a lot of money for it. Whereas if Kay really wanted watermelon, it's something that's important to her, and therefore you're willing to spend more money on it. I think from your description, Kay had also set in her mind, I am going to get watermelon.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come home without the watermelon because I've decided we've got this juicer. I want to make this recipe. I'm going to feel like I've missed out if I come home and I can't make that recipe because I don't have watermelon. Or I've then got to go to the hassle of going somewhere else to find a watermelon, and that's more time, more money, whatever.
Because it's really interesting just thinking about this, because from the greengrocer's perspective, she's got a kind of everything in place to make that high-end sale. Okay, she's got scarcity. There's only one.
Yep. Can't get much more scarce than that, can you?
Okay. She's got a captive audience. That captive audience wants the one watermelon. They want it today. There's more time pressure there. And as you said, it's anchored to a greater purpose, desire, need that she wants to fulfill.
Yeah.
So why apologise? I mean, it's like you couldn't have made up a better sales pitch if you tried. You could, if that was put into a sales letter, we've got one watermelon, and it goes tomorrow, and I know there's going to be 50 people coming to the shop today. The likelihood is somebody's going to ask for a watermelon. Don't be the one who misses out, because then you're not going to have all that lovely juice that you want to make, and your diet and blah blah blah, and feeling good and all the rest of it. And you couldn't make it up, could you? Why apologise?
I think it's just rooted in her own belief system about what she would pay for it, whether she would want it. I don't know the answer. I'm not...
Because I think what's really, really interesting from I know you've done a lot on buying behaviours, but from a selling behaviour, I think our selling behaviours are affected by our buying behaviours.
Absolutely. I mean, they're all based in biases and what you perceive. That's why I'm saying it's about her own beliefs, because it's about what she perceives is worth paying for and a value that she would attribute. Some of that's going to be because she knows how much she paid for it at market when she bought it.
And maybe she thought that was expensive at that point.
Exactly. Yeah. And so she's then got to put a markup on it and feels apologetic about putting a markup on it. Some of it's about her own confidence and, confidence in her business pricing, the ability to turn business away.
Although it is quite funny when you go down there, because pretty much every time you buy something, it's a different price.
Yeah.
I think she just makes it up on the spot.
Probably.
But that's a different thing. But it's interesting because I think the relevance of this is that, well, I know the relevance of this is I did some sales training for a team. I'm not a sales trainer, but they wanted, as part of the work we were doing, just talk about confidence when you're selling and stuff like that. And it was a really, really good discussion, and we did a few exercises. And one of the exercises we did is we worked out, I mean, they already knew it, but I just thought it'd be good to do it there and then. We worked out the average value of the sale that they were putting in front of people consistently. And then I said, okay, well, what would have to happen for you to, the next time you have a prospect and the next time you're in the middle of that sales conversation, add a 0. And they immediately go, oh, well, what else would we be offering? How could we do that? I said, no. You're going to sell the same product, the same service, and instead of charging, on average, £400 for it, I want you to look them in the eye and say, it's £4,000, please, for the same service. And every single one of them was just silent.
I see the jaw drops.
I can't do that. And actually what was going through their heads is, I would never pay £4,000.
Yeah, exactly. And that's anchored in your own belief system about what is valuable to you.
Yeah. And we talked at length in the past about you are not your customer. And I think this is a really, really important lesson, because there are lots of ways to set pricing. But the worst way to set pricing is what you believe your product or service is worth, unless you've done a lot of work on your own values. And I think there are too many people who, I mean, the client, the owner of the business yesterday kind of jokingly said that actually they don't really use a lot of people that I refer them to, because it seems that I've always told them to put the prices up at the time he's got to them.
Damn, we need to find somebody else.
But it seems to be a constant battle for people about that pricing piece, and I think that you're right. It is stemmed in what is important to you. Some people quite happily spend $4,000 on a handbag. I wouldn't, not even for somebody else, no matter how much I loved her.
But there is always somebody who will pay that higher price. Always.
Yeah.
You're talking about buying behaviours and selling behaviours. The research and science shows that you should always have 3 price points, and you should have a good, better, best, and your best should be super expensive, but your better isn't necessarily, depending on which way you want to skew behaviour, and that depends on your profit margins, because you might want them to buy the cheapest product because that actually gives you the best profit margin, or you might want them to buy the middle product, so you anchor it against your super high product. You've got to play with where that middle product sits, but you can really skew behaviour based on how you price those. But there will always be somebody who spends £4,000. Tiffany's are selling a paperclip for, I can't remember how much it is, but several £100s
for a paperclip,
for a gold, albeit, but it is just a piece of gold wire.
Functionally, it does exactly the same as a tin paper, whatever they're made of.
Yeah, you can get 1,000 for £1.
Yes.
But someone must be willing to spend several £100s on a gold Tiffany's paperclip.
And I think there's another thing here as well, because one of the things I said to this team is that it doesn't matter whether you would buy it or not. You're right, somebody out there will look at that and go, okay. And I think almost more importantly, when somebody goes, okay, it gives you the confidence to recognise that actually, wow, what we do has value. I always remember in my tennis coaching days when we were coming to the end of my involvement on court, and I'd very much become the business owner and was spending a lot of my time on the things that business owners should do. And, you know, my rackets were in a cupboard is the phrase that we used to use all the time. And it is really clear to my team that the last person they should call upon to cover stuff was me. Okay, to the point where I would start turning up not in tennis clothing, so I couldn't even go on court. It wasn't an option, you know. I'd be in jeans and a shirt and stuff like that. I wanted to present myself as far away from being a tennis coach as possible, just to take the idea out of their head. And we had on the website, because we felt we should, because it helped anchor the coaches' prices, one-to-one lessons with me. So at the time, I think, depending on, you know, qualifications, experience, that sort of stuff, an hour with a coach was maybe 35 quid, 35 pounds. I can't remember, this is 10 years ago. And bloody hell, 10 years ago. And so we went, well, Ash has got to be at least double. Right. And it was uncomfortable, but we put me out there at £70, and the number of inquiries went up.
Yeah.
So we're like, okay, this is a nightmare, because we're having to turn people down and come up with excuses as to why Ash is too busy and da 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 da. So we went, okay, well, let's put it up again, and we doubled it again, and we made it 150 for an hour with me. And I remember distinctly somebody calling up, and I happened to answer the phone. They said, oh, you know, I'd like some tennis lessons. I would like them with you, because I'd answered with my name. And I was like, I'm really, really sorry. I'm very, very busy. I might be able to do something. And he said, well, I can see your fee. So it was 140 quid, I think. And he said, you must be really good.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I am. Where do you want the lesson? He said, well, I'd like it at my house. And I said, well, okay, that's absolutely fine, but I'm going to have to charge you 3 hours of my time, because it's time to get there, time to come back, and I can't be building my business and doing what I need to be doing in those, you know, hours in between. It's not far away, 20 minutes. And he just, over the phone, he just went, okay.
Yeah, I don't care. I just want it.
I don't care. I just want it.
Yeah.
And I always kick myself, because I think if it had been £300, £400,
he'd have still bought it. Yeah.
Because it was expensive.
Yeah. And that's anchored in people's perceptions about, if it's expensive, it must be good.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point.
And there are some people, sorry to interrupt you, but there are some people who won't buy something because it's too cheap. So they think, well, if it's that cheap, you know, in their head, they're mentally comparing that with Poundland and going, well, you know, only cheap stuff goes in Poundland, but it breaks. It doesn't last very long. Therefore, if I pay this cheap price, psychologically, I'm not expecting it to last very long. It might shrink. You know, the colour might run in it. It probably will break after, you know, a couple of uses. But that's okay, because I'm not paying very much for it. And the same psychology is rooted in your cheap prices for your product. Then people don't value it. No.
And when you're selling yourself, and this is tough, but what starts to happen is that people don't value you.
Yeah.
And when other people don't value you because you positioned yourself too cheaply, you start to not value you, and that affects your confidence in putting in the price that's too low in the first place.
Yep.
So, you know, you might be consulting and charging, I don't know, 100, 150 quid an hour, just making numbers up, you know, say £100 an hour, and you find, you know, you find that uncomfortable to start with. You then start saying it to a few people, and then somebody rejects you. Or you get a couple of rejections, because not everybody makes every sale, and it's not necessarily about the money. It's just maybe it wasn't the right fit at the right time. So then what happens instead is you go, oh, well, maybe if I made it 80, they'll buy. And what they're thinking about is that person, and whether that person would have bought if you make it 80 quid or you make it 70 quid. What we don't do is we go, okay, this person didn't buy at 100. Fine. That's that person's choice. What if I made it 120? Because for every person that won't buy at 100, who might buy at 80, there's somebody who's not going to buy at 100, but would buy at 120.
Yep.
So I think you've got that opportunity to flip how you think of yourself when other people reject you.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. And you know, I think we've had this conversation before, but the fastest way to give your business or yourself a pay rise, your business an increase in profits and revenue is to put your prices up. And most people then go, oh, but I might lose some customers. But if you do the maths, if you put your prices up 20% and you lose 10% of your customers, you're still going to be better off. And you'll have more time in your day.
Yeah. Well,
so it's okay to lose that bottom 10%.
We did this again. Going back to tennis business, we did this. I think we had, I can't remember the numbers now. It was around about 400, 450 customers at that time. When we literally doubled prices, I mean, it was about 3 pence off doubling, and we lost about 100. Mm-hmm. And then within 3 months, we were oversubscribed again.
Yep.
Because suddenly we created capacity. And people referred friends, and the people that referred friends were people who could afford the fee that we charge.
Yeah.
So
I think you gave me a piece of advice when I was doing my skating clothing, and I was pretty resistant to it, but we agreed that I was going to put my prices up by 25% overnight, and I was absolutely terrified of doing this. I just didn't think that people would pay more than what they were already paying. I already felt like, you know, I'd already calculated my profit margins was all right at that price. It wasn't amazing, but it was enough to make it work. To put them up 25% was terrifying, and I was like, I'm going to lose all my business and nobody's going to buy at this rate. What happened? One person complained about the pricing. They still bought it, they just bitched and moaned about it. Nobody else even mentioned it. Nobody. And I then got in a habit of saying, well, now I am going to have an annual price increase of at least 5%. That was my absolute bottom, because that kept me in line with inflation. Yep. And increases in supplier costs and shipping costs and all, you know, all the incidental things that we don't normally account for. But it's really important when you're looking at landed cost of garment products. And that was my absolute minimum. Come what may, every April my prices would go up by a minimum of 5%, no matter what. Most years I put them up between 10 and 25%. Nobody cared. And
I think the other thing with that is that, you know, you're talking about landed products, but in a service business, for instance, if you're selling yourself or your brain or whatever, every year that you stay in business as a service provider, you're 1 year more experienced. Yep. That has value. Mm-hmm. You have spent 1 year's more time, an extra year's period of time working with clients, solving problems. Mm-hmm. That has value. You've also got costs that, although you're not delivering a landed product, still are viable costs. Mm-hmm. Heating, lighting, office rent's got up. You know, whether you've got an assistant, you need to pay them more to keep them in line with inflation. Your costs go up, even if you are an individual running a business that's from your house or your loft or your office in the garden or whatever it is, and your pricing consistently has to, match those costs, as well as the added value you give, because you're further along the line in terms of experience. Because if you don't, for the first reason, you're undervaluing yourself, and for the second, just because of inflation and the way it works, you're losing money. You're cutting into your profits each year.
Yeah, and what I see a lot of businesses do is they don't increase, and then in 5 years' time they suddenly do a big jump.
And that's when they lose people.
Because the shock is too great. When I'm not doing them at the moment because of my hip, but when I was doing ice skating lessons, my coach didn't put his prices up for a few years, and then all of a sudden they went up by a jump. If he had put his prices up by 50p a year, I wouldn't have even noticed.
You wouldn't have noticed.
But in total, that would have probably 50 pence a year on an hour's lesson would have ended up in 5 years' time probably being more than what the price actually went up by. And I wouldn't have even questioned it, wouldn't have thought about it. I would have gone, 50p is nothing, But, because it went up by, a few quid in a jump, my comparison was, well, last week I was paying this and now I'm paying this.
Because you look at immediate.
You're looking at that
comparison,
immediate, not, well, I've been paying that price for 5 years and actually everyone else put their prices up in that time.
Yeah.
Even if you know that stuff, psychologically your brain still jumps to that and it still feels painful. Same if you, I don't know, you get your shoes mended at the cobbler and they haven't put their prices up for ages and all of a sudden it's not £8 anymore, it's £14. You go, come on, heck, you put your prices up.
The story that, this, don't laugh, we can laugh at the end, but for when I was about 18, I came across a barber when I had hair. And he was in Shepherd's Bush, and he used to cut Kevin Gallen's hair, who was a striker for QPR at the time. So, and I lived in Shepherd's Bush, so I'd go to this barber, a great guy, Ali. His son was called Ali as well, and for years I'd insist on Ali, not Ali Jr., cutting my hair because he didn't really know what he was doing. And I think probably for about 20, maybe 22, 23 years, I would get my hair cut on a Saturday on the way to the game, even when I lived in places like Reading and Oxford, because he was my barber. And after a while, Ali Jr. took over the business and he started cutting my hair. And I always remember getting up from the chair and, whichever Ali it was, looking at me and going, and me saying, how much is that? Because especially when I moved to Oxford, it might be 4 or 5 months before I'd seen them, because I get my hair locally, but sometimes I make the effort to do it and go there. And he would always say the same thing every single time, which was the usual. Now, my haircut probably went, in fact, I can remember it, I think it was about £6.50 when I first went. And I reckon that probably went up to about £19, £20 for the same cut. And all he ever charged me was the usual.
So what did you pay?
Whatever the rate was at that time, but the way he positioned it was it's just the usual. Because as far as I was concerned, I was a regular customer. So I just paid whatever he usually charged me, which was whatever he was currently charging. There was no embarrassment about that. There was no, oh, well, you were here a month ago and you were paying £5.50, and he had no prices. Yeah. He it's just the usual. And if I don't like it, I'll go somewhere else. And I would drive. Sometimes it was a 100-mile round trip to pay 20 quid to get my hair cut, or I could walk down the road into town and get it done.
But this is why it's so important to not, as a business, make assumptions about where people are in their buying journey and what they're prepared to spend. Yeah. I used to, I grew up in Leeds, and I had a hairdresser that I trusted implicitly, and obviously when I moved down here it was too far away and I couldn't go to her anymore. I would actually time my hairdresser visits so that when I was up seeing my parents, I'd go and get my hair cut.
Same, very similar then, yeah.
And, it didn't cost, like, her fee wasn't more, but if I factored in the time and the petrol of whatever, that was a blooming expensive haircut.
Yeah.
But it mattered to me enough to make that effort. Yes, it took time out of the weekend, that was a whole different story. When I was supposed to be seeing parents and stuff, and I'd go to the hairdresser for 2 or 3 hours. But you don't know that. As a business owner or a salesperson in whatever you're doing, you don't know where people are in those decisions that they're making about what's important to them and why.
Yeah. So let us know, listeners, what's expensive to you, what are the things you wouldn't dream of spending a lot of money on, but you would spend.
So how much was the watermelon?
I've got no idea. Didn't ask her. I didn't care.
What happened to the other 3/4 of the watermelon?
I don't know.
You've only told me half a story here.
It's probably still sitting in the background waiting for Kate to come back tomorrow and buy the rest of it. I don't know. But yeah, as always, just love to hear anything that resonates. What's your favourite expense story? What's the thing that...
Oh yeah, what do you spend money on where money's no object?
Yeah, that you just don't think about
your buying decision is overcome
all
cost.
Based on value, not cost.
Yeah, what it means to you and why it's important.
And how can you take that, and maybe the takeaway today is how can you take that into your business and stop making assumptions based on your own pricing values as to what other people think you and your service is worth.
Yeah.